Hello everyone, this is your instructor in income taxation. Still, our topic for today is fundamental principles of taxation. This is actually the second part of the fundamental principles of taxation. Ang una nating pag-uusapan for today ay yung purposes of taxation. Why does the government impose and collect taxes? The government imposes and collects taxes because the government has a purpose of doing that. So what are the purposes of taxation? Meron tayong tinatawag na primary purpose of taxation at secondary purpose of taxation. Unahin natin yung primary purpose of taxation. The primary purpose of taxation is the revenue purpose or otherwise known as fiscal purpose. So ang ibig sabihin nito, ang primary purpose of taxation is to raise revenue for the government. Bakit kailangan na mag-raise ng revenue ang government? Of course, para maisakatuparan niya yung kanyang lehitimong activities or programs. That is evident in the definition of taxation. So don't forget the definition of taxation. The primary purpose of taxation on the part of the government is to provide funds or property with which to promote the general welfare and the protection of its citizens and to enable it to finance its multifarious activities. So sinasabi dito na mayroong tax para magkaroon ng pondo ang gobyerno. At yung pondo ng gobyerno, yun yung gagamitin for general welfare, protection of the citizens of a country, and to finance the different activities or programs of the government. So for example, during the pandemic, di ba nagbigay ng financial assistance ang gobyerno sa mga tao, even sa mga businesses. So ang ginamit doon ay yung pondo ng gobyerno. Of course, yung pondo ng gobyerno nagmula sa taxes. Another example, kung gusto ng gobyerno na magsagawa ng proyekto, saan niya kukunin yung pondo? Of course, natural, sa kinolektang taxes. That is revenue or fiscal purpose of taxation. So examples of taxes imposed for raising revenues are income taxes and business taxes. Next, let's proceed to the secondary purpose of taxation. The secondary purpose of taxation is the regulatory purpose or otherwise known as sumptuary or compensatory purpose. While the primary purpose of taxation is to raise revenue for the support of the government, taxation is often employed as a device for regulation or control. Meaning to say, pwedeng gamitin yung taxation for regulation or control. Pwedeng gamitin yung taxation for regulation or control for the promotion of general welfare, reduction of social inequality, and economic growth. So, unahin natin yung promotion of general welfare. For example, yung alak at sigarilyo. Yung alak at sigarilyo, those are non-essential goods. Hindi sila essential goods. At dahil hindi sila essential goods, merong sin tax na pinapataw sa cigarettes at alcohol. Merong sin tax na pinapataw sa alak at sigarilyo. That's why sobrang mahal ng sigarilyo at alak. Kailangang patawan ng sin tax ang alak at sigarilyo kasi nga kung hindi papatawan yung sigarilyo at alak ng sin tax, mas magiging affordable yung sigarilyo at alak. Kung may sin tax yung alak at sigarilyo, then mas magiging mahal yung alak at sigarilyo. At dahil mas magiging mahal yung alak at sigarilyo, mas kukonte yung bibili. And eventually, kung mas kukonte yung bibili, mas kukonte yung maaapektuhan since yung alak at sigarilyo, hindi sila maganda sa kalusugan. They are harmful to the health. Next, reduction of social inequality. A very good example of this is the reduction of social inequality between the rich and the poor. Let's say, yung mahirap, wala siyang mamanahin. At yung mayaman, meron siyang mamanahin. So para mabawasan yung social inequality, itatax yung pagpapamana ng rich parent sa kanyang rich kid. That is reduction of social inequality. Next, economic growth. For example, we have taxpayers that have special taxes. Meron silang special taxes. Gaya ng companies registered under the Philippine Economic Zone Authority or PEZA. At yung mga companies na registered under BOI or Board of Investments. Actually, if you compare their taxes, medyo mas mababa yung kanilang taxes kaysa sa regular taxes natin at regular taxes ng regular companies. So the objective is actually for economic growth. For example, magke-create tayo dito ng industrial park or eco zones. So dyan mag-i-stay yung mga companies registered under Philippine Economic Zone Authority or PEZA. But actually, the purpose is to improve the economic growth in our country. Okay? That is to improve the economic growth of our country. Kasi nga, mas maraming mamumunuhan na foreign entities dito sa Philippines. Examples of taxes imposed for regulation are excise taxes for sin products or simply sin tax such as cigarettes and alcohols. And of course, amusement taxes for amusement places such as night and day clubs, cockpits, and racetracks. Examples of means of attaining some social or economic objectives through taxation are increasing taxes in periods of prosperity to curb spending power and halt inflation, and granting tax incentives to promote new or pioneer industries and encourage growth of local industries. Next, let's now proceed to the theory of taxation. When we say theory of taxation, it should answer the question, why? Why is there a taxation? Bakit nga ba merong taxation? As you can see, there are two doctrines or theories. The first one is Lifeblood Doctrine or the Lifeblood Theory, and the second one is the Necessity Theory. Lifeblood Doctrine, sinasabi dito sa Lifeblood Doctrine na ang tax ay lifeblood ng government. Taxes are the lifeblood of the government. So bakit may tax? Kasi yan ang buhay ng gobyerno. Patay ang gobyerno at walang gobyerno kung walang tax. Necessity theory, kailangan ang tax kasi may pangangailangan ang gobyerno. So let's expound those two doctrines or theories. Unahin natin yung Lifeblood Doctrine. So without taxes, the government would be paralyzed for lack of the motive power to activate and operate it. Meaning to say, mapaparalisa ang gobyerno without taxes. The government cannot function well without taxes. The power of taxation is essential because the government can neither exist nor endure without taxation. So buhay ng gobyerno ang taxes. Taxes are the lifeblood of the government, and their prompt and certain availability is an imperious need. So the government cannot continue to perform its basic functions of serving and protecting its people kung wala siyang pamamaraan sa pagbayad ng kanyang mga gastusin. Kaya siya tinawag na Lifeblood Doctrine. So that is the theory of taxation. Bakit may tax? May tax kasi nga patay ang gobyerno kung walang tax. Consequently, the state has the right to compel o puwersahin sa ayaw at sa gusto mo all its citizens and property within its limits to contribute. So yung pagbabayad ng taxes ay mandatory. Hindi yan at your option. So kung sa batas natin, when you are liable for that particular tax, then you must pay that tax because tax is an enforced contribution. That is not a voluntary contribution, but that is an enforced contribution. Next, necessity theory. The power to tax is a power emanating from necessity. So bakit may tax? May tax kasi kailangan siya ng gobyerno. Always remember that on the part of the taxpayers, ang tax ay burden. Although tax is a burden, kailangan siya ng gobyerno to preserve the state's sovereignty and a means to give the citizenry an army to resist an aggression, a navy to defend its shores from invasion, a corps of civil servants to serve, public improvements designed for the enjoyment of the citizenry and those which come within the state's territory, and facilities and protection which a government is supposed to provide. So in other words, as a summary, tax is necessary for the government to protect the people and the territory of a country. And of course, to provide public improvements and carry out its activities and programs. That is necessity theory. Kailangan ng gobyerno ang tax. May tax kasi kailangan ng gobyerno ang tax. Next, let's proceed to the basis of taxation. When we say basis of taxation, we pertain to the justification or rationale of taxation. So the basis of taxation is the benefits received or reciprocity theory. Pag sinabi mong benefits received, meron kang natatanggap na benefits from the government. So kung meron kang natatanggap na benefits from the government, then that justifies the collection of taxes. Pwede kang kolektahan ng tax. Nagko-collect ng tax ang gobyerno dahil meron kang nare-receive o natatanggap na benefits from the government, whether that benefit is direct or indirect. So yung reciprocity theory naman, ang ibig sabihin niyan, the government should do its part, and we as people should also do our part. So we pay taxes, and the government should reciprocate it by providing us benefits, although the benefits are not specific. So the basis of taxation is the reciprocal duties of protection and support between the state and its inhabitants. So yung ibibigay sa atin ng gobyerno ay yung protection at yung ibibigay natin sa gobyerno ay yung support. The state collects taxes from the subjects of taxation. Ano na ulit yung subjects of taxation? Pwedeng persons, property, privileges, rights, including transactions, in order that it may be able to perform the functions of the government. The citizens, on the other hand, pay taxes. So, hindi naman pwedeng puro ka lang tanggap ng benepisyo. Mag-share ka din. So, magbayad ka din ng taxes in order that they may be secured in the enjoyment of the benefits of organized society. Ang tawag mo din dyan ay Doctrine of Symbiotic Relationship, which means taxes are what we pay for a civilized society. So, if you want to live in a civilized society, then you have to pay taxes. Do your part as a taxpayer. So that is the basis of taxation. The reciprocal duties of protection and support between the state and its inhabitants, or simply the benefits received or reciprocity theory. Let's now proceed to the manifestations of the Lifeblood Doctrine. So there are 5 manifestations of the Lifeblood Doctrine, and they are: first, rule of no estoppel or estoppel against the government. The proper pronunciation for this is estoppel. But in the Philippines, nakagawian kasi na ang pagbigkas ay estoppel. Pero dapat estoppel. Second, collection of taxes cannot be enjoined or stopped by injunction. Third, taxes could not be the subject of compensation or set-off. Fourth, right to select objects or subjects of taxation. And fifth, a valid tax may result in the destruction of the taxpayer's property. The first manifestation of the Lifeblood Doctrine is the rule of no estoppel or estoppel against the government. It means that in the performance of its governmental functions, the state cannot be stopped by the neglect of its agents or officers. So the Philippine government is not subject to estoppel or estoppel. If ever nagkamali ang government employee, it does not bind the government. Let's say there's a negligence o kapabayaan on the part of one employee, then it does not bind the government as a whole. Erroneous application and enforcement of law by public officers do not block the subsequent correct application of statutes. If ever nagkamali yung government employee in applying the tax laws, of course, that government employee should be given a chance to correct the erroneous application of tax laws. That is rule of no estoppel or estoppel against the government. Next manifestation, collection of taxes cannot be enjoined or stopped by injunction. So no court, except the Court of Tax Appeals, shall have the authority to grant an injunction to restrain the collection of any national internal revenue tax, fee, or charge imposed by the tax code. So generally, yung mga korte, except the Court of Tax Appeals, they are not allowed to restrain the collection of taxes. Why? Of course, kung allowed yung mga korte na i-restrain yung collection of taxes, then madedelay lang yung collection of taxes. Recall that taxes are the lifeblood of the government. So kung lifeblood yan ng government, dapat makolekte yung taxes without unnecessary delay. Next, taxes could not be the subject of compensation or set-off. Sir, ano yung compensation or set-off? Let's say, may utang ako sa iyo na 1,000 pesos. Ikaw, may utang ka din sa akin na 1,000 pesos. May utang ako sa iyo, may utang ka din sa akin. So, it's as if wala tayong utang sa isa't isa. Kumbaga, quits. Wala na akong obligation na magbayad sa iyo ng 1,000 pesos. Wala ka na ring obligation na magbayad sa akin ng 1,000 pesos. Let's say may utang ako sa iyo na 1,000 pesos, may utang ka din sa akin na 800 pesos. So, i-deduct ko na yung 800 pesos sa 1,000 pesos. So, bale, ang babayaran ko na lang sa iyo ay 200 pesos. Yun yung pinakasimpleng explanation ng compensation or set-off. Taxes cannot be subject to set-off or compensation since claim for taxes is not a debt or contract. So the taxpayer cannot delay payment of tax to wait for the resolution of a lawsuit involving his or her pending claim against the government. So, kung ngayon, dapat ka nang magbayad ng tax, dapat magbayad ka na ng tax. Hindi mo pwedeng hintayin kung ano man yung pwede mong i-claim from the government bago ka magbayad ng tax. Ang tax, hindi siya utang, hindi din siya kontrata. Therefore, it is not subject to compensation or set-off. A distinguishing feature of a tax is that it is compulsory rather than a matter of bargain. Ang tax ay compulsory, hindi siya pwedeng i-bargain. For example, meron kang matatanggap from the government. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihin na yun na yung pambabayad mo ng tax. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihin na hindi mo na ako magbabayad ng tax ngayon. I-deduct na lang ng government sa babayaran kong tax yung makukuha ko from the government. So, hindi pwede. Tax is not subject to compensation or set-off. If taxes could be a subject of compensation or set-off, it can easily give rise to confusion and abuse, depriving the government of authority over the manner by which taxpayers can credit and offset their tax liabilities. That is, taxes could not be the subject of compensation or set-off. Next, right to select objects or subjects of taxation. The power to tax is essentially legislative in nature. So since legislative siya in nature, then yung Congress ang may karapatan na mag-select ng objects or subjects of taxation. Ang Congress ang mamimili kung sino at ano yung papatawan ng taxes. The matters within the competence of the legislature include the determination of the following. So ito yung mga pwedeng i-determine ng Congress. First, the subject or object to be taxed. Sino nga ba at ano nga ba ang papatawan ng taxes? Second, the purpose of the tax as long as it is a public purpose. Kasi nga, di ba, if a private purpose yan, it is invalid. Third, the amount or rate of the tax. Fourth, kind of tax. Fifth, apportionment of the tax. Saan ba i-apportion yung tax? Para saan at para kanino gagamitin yung taxes. Sixth, situs of taxation. When we say situs of taxation, it means the place of taxation. Taxable ba yan sa Philippines or hindi? And seventh, the manner, means, and agencies of collection of the tax. So, paano ba i-collect yung tax? At ano ba yung mga Philippine agencies na pwedeng mag-collect ng taxes? So all of these are determined by the Congress or the Legislative Department of the Philippine government. Next, a valid tax may result in the destruction of the taxpayer's property. Meron kasing tinatawag na Marshall Doctrine, and this doctrine states that the power to tax involves or includes the power to destroy. Ang ibig sabihin niyan, taxation can be used to discourage or prohibit undesirable activities or occupation. So, hindi literal yung power to destroy. Hindi sisirain yung isang bagay. Ang taxation, pwedeng gamitin yan to discourage or prohibit undesirable activities. A very good example of this is the imposition of excessive tax on cigarettes. Ang tawag dun sa taxes na ini-impose sa cigarettes ay sin tax. Okay? So, nowadays, di ba mahal ang sigarilyo? Mahal ang sigarilyo kasi malaki din yung pinapataw na sin tax sa sigarilyo. So yan yung sinasabi natin na the power to tax involves or includes the power to destroy. Gaya dyan sa sin tax sa sigarilyo. Pinapatawan ng malaking taxes ang sigarilyo para ma-discourage yung undesirable use of cigarettes since ang sigarilyo, that is non-essential good. Let's now proceed to the scope of the power of taxation. The scope of the power of taxation is widely regarded as comprehensive, unlimited, plenary, and supreme. So, may mnemonics tayo dito para mas madali nating tandaan. Ang ating mnemonics ay COPS. C for comprehensive, U for unlimited, P for plenary, and S for supreme. First, comprehensive. Ang taxation ay comprehensive kasi sakop niya lahat. It covers persons, businesses, activities, professions, rights, and privileges. So, pwedeng patawan ng tax ang mga yan. Persons, businesses, activities, professions, rights, and privileges. Next, unlimited. In the absence of limitations prescribed by law or the Constitution, the power to tax is unlimited. Unlimited in the sense na basta may law na nagsasabing pwedeng patawan ng tax ang isang tao o bagay, papatawan talaga ng taxes. That's why, di ba, as to amount imposed, unlimited ang amount na ini-impose sa power of taxation. Next, plenary. Plenary because the power of taxation is complete. So, ang ibig sabihin ng plenary ay kompleto. And last, supreme. The power of taxation is supreme because it is the highest and the strongest power among the inherent powers of the state insofar as the selection of the subject of taxation is concerned. So, sa pag-select ng pwedeng patawan ng taxes, ang power of taxation ang pinakamataas. That's why the power of taxation is supreme. Let's now proceed to the essential elements or characteristics of tax. There are 6 essential elements or characteristics of tax, and the first one is that it is an enforced contribution. Pag sinabi mong enforced contribution, wala tayong magagawa dyan as taxpayers. So, we need to pay whether we like it or not. So, hindi naman pwedeng magbayad ka lang ng taxes if you want to pay tax. Hindi rin naman pwedeng if you don't want to pay taxes, don't pay tax. Of course, wala namang ganon since ang tax ay enforced contribution. So, the moment that you are taxable under our tax code, then obviously, you need to pay that particular tax. Otherwise, you will be subjected to pay penalties and interest, or worse, pwede ka ring makulong. So, the payment of tax is not voluntary payment or donation, but an enforced contribution exacted pursuant to legislative authority. The next essential element or characteristic of tax is that it is generally payable in money. It is a pecuniary burden payable in money which must be in legal tender. Yung pecuniary, ang ibig sabihin niyan, monetary, may kinalaman sa pera. Tax is generally payable in money kasi hindi okay na ang pambayad ng taxes ay hindi in the form of money. Kasi for example, kung property ang ibabayad ng taxpayers, kailangan pa yung ibenta ng government. So dapat nakakonsentrate ang tax authorities sa pangongolekta ng taxes at hindi sa pagbebenta ng mga ibinayad sa kanila ng taxpayers. Kaya generally payable in money. However, ang sabi dito ay generally. So, ibig sabihin, there are instances na pwedeng bayaran ang tax not in the form of money. For example, insolvent na yung taxpayer. Wala na talaga siyang pera. Ang natitira na lang sa kanya ay bahay at lupa. So, pwedeng kunin ng gobyerno yung bahay at lupa. Tapos, ipapublic auction yan later ng gobyerno. So, pag pinapublic auction yan, whatever is the proceeds doon sa pag-public auction ng bahay at lupa, ibabayad yon sa tax mo. Kung sobra, syempre, ibabalik sa'yo. Kung kulang, edi magbabayad ka pa ng taxes. Okay? Kaya siya generally payable in money. Next, the third essential element or characteristic of tax is that it is proportionate in character. So recall that the amount of tax that may be imposed by the government is unlimited, but do not take it literally. Proportionate in character kasi nakadepende yung amount of tax sa kapasidad ng taxpayer na magbayad. Okay? That is the meaning of proportionate in character. Next, it is levied on persons, property, or exercise of a right or privilege. Meaning to say, ini-impose ang tax sa mga tao, sa mga pag-aari, or exercise of a right or privilege. Ang sabi dito, it is levied on persons. So yung tax, pinapataw sa mga tao. Ang example nito ay sedula. Ang sedula ay personal tax. Next, it is levied on property. So pinapataw sa property. So this pertains to the property tax. Ito yung tax na pinapataw sa mga real properties. Next, it is levied on exercise of a right or privilege. So yung tawag sa tax na ini-impose sa pag-exercise ng right or privilege ay excise tax. At karamihan ng taxes dito sa Philippines ay excise tax. Ano ba yung mga examples ng excise tax? First, income tax. Ang income tax, that is a tax on the privilege to earn. Okay? Another example, donor's tax. Ang donor's tax, that is a tax on the privilege to donate. And another example, estate tax. Ang estate tax, that is a tax on the privilege na magpamana. So those are the typical examples of excise tax. Next, it is levied by the lawmaking body of the state. The power of imposing a tax is purely a legislative function. When we say lawmaking body, it pertains to the legislative branch of the government. So the tax is imposed by the legislative branch of the government, which pertains to the Congress. Next, the last element or characteristic of tax is that it is levied for public purpose. So, pinapataw ang tax for public purpose and not for the private interest of individuals. So, hindi yan para sa politicians, yan ay para sa atin. Take note that if taxes are levied for public purpose, then that is invalid. So yan ang ibig sabihin ng it is levied for public purpose. Let's proceed to the aspects of taxation. When we say aspects of taxation, they refer to stages, phases, or process that are included or embodied in the term taxation. So, sinabi ko na dati, when we say aspects of taxation, we are pertaining to the different steps to be undertaken by the government in order to meet its objectives, yung pangongolekta ng taxes. Sinabi ko din dati, hindi basta-basta kokolektahan ka na lang ng taxes. Of course, dadaan yan sa proseso. The first aspect of taxation is levying. Again, kapag sinabing levying, this is the imposition of tax or enactment of tax law. So, paano mag-impose ng tax? Of course, gagawa ng tax law. That is enactment of tax law. E sino ang gagawa ng tax law? Ang gagawa ng tax law ay of course yung legislative branch ng ating gobyerno. The legislative branch of the government. Kaya if you recall, sinabi natin through its legislative branch or body. Kaya ang may karapatang gumawa ng tax law ay yung legislative branch at hindi yung executive branch. It's the legislative branch that enacts laws, not the executive branch of our government. So for example, sa national government, ang mag-i-impose ng tax at gagawa ng tax law ay yung Senate at House of Representatives. Sir, national government lang ba ang may karapatang magpataw ng tax? No. It also applies to local government units, particularly yung province natin, city, municipality, and barangay. Pero gaya sa national government, ang may right o karapatan na magpataw ng tax ay hindi yung executive branch, kundi yung legislative branch. So sa probinsya, it's not the governor, it's not the city or municipal mayor, it's not the barangay chairman. So sino ang nagpapataw? Ang nagpapataw ay yung sanggunian. Sanggunian ng probinsya, sanggunian ng city, munisipyo, at barangay. So, hindi si mayor ang mag-i-impose ng tax dyan sa munisipyo ninyo. Hindi si mayor ang mag-i-impose ng tax dyan sa city nyo. Kundi, yung mga binoto nyo na miyembro ng sanggunian. Of course, those are the councilors. Sila yung nagpapataw ng taxes. So that's the first step or first aspect of taxation. The second aspect of taxation is assessment. Ang ibig sabihin niyan, when you say assessment, this is the determination of the correct amount of tax. By the way, kung magkano yung tax, paano kokolektahin yung tax, ano yung penalty kapag hindi tinupad, trabaho lahat yon ng legislative branch. For example, bakit ganito yung tax rate ng corporation? Kasi yon yung ginawa na batas. Yon yung nakalagay doon sa batas. That is enactment of tax law. Pero kung magkano yung tamang amount ng tax due, syempre, ang magko-compute niyan ay executive branch. That's why executive function ang assessment. For example, sa national government, we pertain to the BIR or the Bureau of Internal Revenue and BOC or the Bureau of Customs. Siyempre, sa ating LGUs, yan naman yung mga City Treasurer, Municipal Treasurer, Provincial Treasurer, and Barangay Treasurer. So, assessment, this is the determination kung magkano ang amount of tax. But take note, in determining the correct amount of tax, syempre nakabase yon sa batas na ginawa ng legislative branch. Since yung legislative branch, sila yung gumagawa ng batas. Or let's say, sanggunian, if you are pertaining to local taxes. So that's the second step or aspect of taxation. Next, the third aspect of taxation is collection. Ang nangongolekta ng tax ay hindi yung legislative branch ng ating gobyerno. Hindi rin yung sanggunian. Ang nangongolekta, for example, sa national government, ang BIR at BOC. That's why yung collection, trabaho yan ng BIR at BOC, or in case of local taxes, treasurer sa city, probinsya, or munisipyo ninyo. That is the third aspect of taxation, that is collection. So again, the three aspects of taxation are levying, assessment, and collection.